unless we have a mandatory meeting where everybody has to come in, it's like, hey, you guys want to come in for Thanksgiving dinner? No. It's like, don't want to do the potluck this year. It's like, oh, okay. And so I think that it's probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done as a leader is try to keep things manageable. You keep your leaders informed and know what those people are doing all the time when they're home. So it's tough.
Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite, and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
On this episode of Power Supply, we are going to talk with Alan Edwards, Vice President of Supply Chain at Mary Washington Healthcare. And Gary, this discussion all about the lost arts, customer service, and follow-up. Interested to know how Alan has set out expectations for his team around customer service, who his customer is, and how does he manage follow-up, and what are some key ingredients to excellent follow-up skills. Gary, this is going to be a good one today.
No, looking forward to it. Looking forward to it, Justin. It's just to see what that looks like post-pandemic. I know we keep talking about that, but we've been out for a while. And the customer experience of, I think you brought it up, is who is their customer and what do they follow up on? And it is within the hospital area, within the acute or the non-acute. I'm really interested to see what his best practices are within the healthcare setting, both acute and non-acute, to see where he takes it for that customer service experience. We're all trying to get back to where we need to be on that. So really looking forward to what he brings to the table. And I know he has a wealth of experience. Looking forward to today's talk with Justin and Hayes. Appreciate it.
All right. Alan Edwards up next.
I'm Hayes Walder.
This is Gary Skinner.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Power Supply.
We are talking with Alan Edwards, Vice President of Supply Chain at Mary Washington Healthcare. And I love the topic for our discussion today, Alan. It's something that you and I connected on ahead of time and kind of put an outline together. But we titled it The Lost Arts, Customer Service and Follow-Up. And I really do feel like, and I'll tee this conversation up, there are times where I go to, a convenience store, I get gas, I go inside, maybe I grab a drink or something to eat. And half the time when I'm checking out, the person's looking down and they're like, is that it? And I feel like just culturally in America, when I grew up, I was a paper boy. I did all kinds of customer service types of roles. I worked at a grocery store, and I remember the managers that I reported to were heavy on customer service. So we are having you on today to talk all about this in the context of supply chain. So thanks for coming on.
Hey, you're welcome. I appreciate the opportunity again.
This is going to be fun. And, Justin, to your point now, if you go into a store, go anywhere, everybody's on their phone. They don't even, act like you exist. And so I feel your pain there. Absolutely.
Well, and now all the self-checkouts, right? So that's just, at least you just don't notice it anymore. Like by removing the human, it's not quite as obvious that there's no customer service. But Alan, why don't you just introduce yourself to all of the listeners? I know you have some friends that were former guests on the show as well.
Sure. So my name is Alan Edwards, and as Justin said, I am the supply chain executive here at Mary Washington Healthcare in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So we're on the I-95 corridor, right between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, Virginia. So 2 hospitals and about 70 plus outpatient facilities. But our goal is, coming out of the pandemic, and as Justin and I talked, what's our strategic plan for 2024? And that's kind of how we landed here. My strategic plan is B2B, back to basics, because I feel like we have lost those arts that Justin teed up for us. Customer service and follow up, and as Hayes pointed out, looking at your phone and not eye to eye contact, those simple things that used to connect us with people does seem to have faded into the past.
Yeah, and our listeners can't see this, but Gary, we're all on video, and Gary's not even here. Are you reading your phone right now, Gary? Are you paying attention?
Oh, Hayes, I'm 100 paying attention. Did you hear back to basics?
Okay.
What Ellen
He was
just
making
said?
notes.
Back
I saw
to
you
basics.
scribbling on your
I want to make
notepad,
sure he was
Gary.
taking notes and not on his phone.
2 hospitals, 70 non-acute. Hayes, I don't know if you can really talk about that, but let's roll. I think it's
TikTok
great.
or something.
Absolutely not. Words with Friends is over, Hayes. I love having Alan on the show.
But by the way, do you still have
baby.
a MySpace page?
MySpace. You realize that half of the audience doesn't even know what MySpace is anymore.
They don't
That's
have a clue.
Hilarious.
FaceSpace or something, whatever it is.
FaceSpace. All right, Alan. So you also have an interesting background, just to kind of bring it back. You didn't just work in healthcare supply chain. You have some experience outside of the industry, and I also want to thank you for your service.
Thank you. So I had a career in the Air Force, and most of that career was in healthcare supply chain. I did do a tour in Air Force recruiting, so a lot of customer service, a lot of follow-up there with families and recruits and those types of things, a lot of sales type initiatives. And moving beyond the military, had the opportunity to spend about 4 or 5 years in big box distribution, if you will, working in retail outside of healthcare, a lot of customer service, front end stores. That's who your customers were, point of sale, those types of things. But I always had felt this calling to serve in healthcare. And so I had the opportunity to go to work at Children's Medical Center in Dallas. Started out in the Peri-Op support services area. They're running supply chain in the OR. Ended up taking sterile processing as well as the support functions for supply chain across those departments. And then eventually moved back to the dark side of supply chain and into the director of supply chain there at Children's. I've been here in my current role since October of 2010. And so it has been a wealth of experiences and building relationships with a lot of different people that I call customers.
You know what I love about tenure like that is it really helps you build your own culture. And it also brings a lot of continuity to the organization. And so you must like it there. I mean, you've probably been through a lot of changes, but 13 years nowadays is a long time to be with an employer or, back to the old days or back to the basics, that's something that used to be highly valued if you were moving jobs every 2 years, but that's kind of out the window now. It's as much of a lost art as customer service.
It sure is. And we talk about that all the time as now you're gaining invaluable experience on those short stops, if you will. I think that, trying to adjust to that to make sure that you can get the right people into the job so you can teach them, about these things that we need and what the skill sets are that you need in supply chain to be successful. So it's been a good ride here. I've enjoyed the time here. And you're right, being able to build the culture. It was a bit like getting off the bus in the 80s when I got here. And so by that, I mean, there was a lot of old processes in place. We've always done it that way. And so there was some resistance to change. But now when you talk to people who have been here throughout the duration with me, their comments are, wow, we've done a lot of good things here since you got here. It was tough at first and we weren't sure where you were going, but we're doing things differently. They make sense and we're making a difference for supply chain across the organization.
With a lot of people still working from home, you kind of mentioned that before, and some people still remote, how do you work on the goals of that customer service experience? What are you finding as we got to continue to, like, we're on video right now, we're talking to each other, we're not walking down the hall, you're not in perioperative services talking to the OR manager, you're talking to the vendor, meeting them in a conference room. What are your goals for keeping that alive and well with that true experience level where it needs to be?
Well, I think you kind of hit the exact sore spot, if you will, for us is that we've become so used to working from home and doing this screen time as opposed to face that we recently started having a conversation internally on our leadership team about how do we get back out, re-engage, reconnect with the customer. And so for us, we used to do scheduled customer service visits, and we had a little informal survey. We go out, talk about, what concerns do you have? How can we help make your job easier taking care of patients? And during the pandemic, we just got away from that. And so now it's like, how do you, get the hook and start pulling your customer service people back into saying, I need you to do face-to-face customer service, but I work from home. Well, it's not, that wasn't a formalized, permanent type position, but it's one that we've all grown accustomed to. And so I think that's probably one of our tough things right now, Gary, is to be able to say, I need you back in the office to do those face-to-face customer visits. You can't replace FaceTime on this. Just no way.
I agree totally with you. But can you help me just define who your customer is? Because I'm assuming, I think I know, but how do you define that?
I don't think you can put it in a single bucket, if you will. And so, Hayes, what I look at is, the bedside caregivers, the associates across our organization, whether they work in food and nutritional services, accounting, anybody that's supporting direct bedside care, physicians, vendors, visitors, and at the center of all that is patients. So I tell our staff that, the one thing I want you to be able to tell our customers, if they say, hey, what is your boss about? I want you to automatically say he's about customer service. He wants us to deliver our best to you so you can give your best to no matter who you're talking to, one of those people in that customer role. So to me, ultimately, it's the patients. If you were to talk to physicians, they may feel a little differently. Bedside caregivers, it's about me, it's about me, it's about me. To me, it's about all of the we there that I just lined out.
Love it.
So you mentioned that this is an initiative for 2024. So you're laying out objectives, back to the basics. A big part of that is the customer service and follow-up. What are your goals for this project? Like, you've obviously, if you're putting an emphasis on this, you must have some areas that you intend to measure along the way to ensure that, you're tracking throughout the year, not just looking back and going, did we do this?
Justin, did you just say KPIs? Did you just mention KPIs?
That's my
We speak the language here too, just so you know. So I think that it's a great point. And, one of the things we said is if you just answer the phone or emails, you're not really doing the job. We need to understand what type of calls are coming in. What are the asks that people are making? And so we had started logging those calls before the pandemic. And then I think they were coming so fast and furious during the pandemic that I think it just got pushed off to the side. And so when we started saying, hey, show us the logs, let's take a look at this, there wasn't a lot there. And so for us, it's about establishing a baseline of customer service. What do people think of supply chain? And I think that I have to promote supply chain to the organization because otherwise all you get is complaints from those types of inquiries or surveys, if you will. And plus the organization is inundated with surveys. And so I don't want to go out too much and, be giving them one more survey where people just check the box to say, yeah, I did that for you, or I did it because Alan asked me to. So I think we want to establish the baselines of customer service. We want to hear from our customers, what is it that we can do better for you? And it's funny because after Justin and I talked, it was like the roof caved in on customer service, and we started getting these concerns from customers who were saying, hey, you don't speak the language that we understand. And, when we bat an email back and forth, it isn't helpful. So our director of sourcing and analytics has been out doing a couple of face-to-face customer visits. And, I think she was enlightened at what the customers had to say. They weren't angry. Their hair wasn't on fire, but they were just saying, we need information that helps us do our job, not just an email that says, oh, the vendor acknowledged your purchase order. They have no clue what that means. And so I think it's meaningful communication along the way. So I think, we are trying to establish the baseline, set some marks for metrics, if you will, along the way. How do we want to measure that success? And then take it from there from a process improvement perspective.
Can I ask you a clarifier on the information that you were sending to them? Was it that the actual information they were receiving from you wasn't valuable, or was it that it wasn't translated into a meaningful way based on how they would use the information, or a mix?
I think it's a mix, Justin, when you talk to our customers. So, one of the things we've heard throughout an ERP conversion back in 2020 was we need information on our orders and, what's on back order and, what's been discontinued. And as you are well aware, while all that was going on, it was just chaos trying to figure out what was truly back order, what was discontinued and those things. But in pushing the team to say, not why we can't give them the information, but how do we give them information that is valuable to them? So we partner with our cath lab. We have a weekly meeting with them, and we have figured out what information the director of the cath lab is looking for. And so we recently were able to produce a report that actually shows her every single requisition that everyone has placed in her department. One of the current shortfalls of our ERP system is that you can only see the requisitions that you put in the system. So you can't see what everybody else can if you're a customer. And so, they're like, well, I can see mine, but I don't put requisitions in the system. I have somebody who does that. Or in the lab, for example, they have multiple people who do it. And so we are trying to get our hands around data. We've invested in analytics and reporting and added a senior analyst in that role, already reaping rewards from that because we're pushing reports out. The next thing is to educate those, because back to your point, what happens is you give them information and the customer's like, I have no clue what that is. I work in the cath lab. I might be a bedside nurse. I might be, a cath tech. But when you talk about order acknowledgments or you just tell me something's back order, you aren't giving me anything that I can make actionable. And so what we're trying to say is don't just check the box and say, why I gave them the update. Did you give them something that was meaningful? And we just heard yesterday, as a matter of fact, from someone that basically said, if I have to email you more than 2 or 3 times on the same thing, something's broken. And so we're trying to figure out how can we get it on the first strike, if you will. The first preemptive strike has got to be, I gave you all the information and I spoke it in a language that you understand at the department level, not supply chain speak. And so I think that's kind of where we're at now and what we're doing with customer service.
I like that a lot. But Alan, can I kind of back up, or maybe Gary should have asked this earlier, frankly, but how many employees do you guys roughly have in supply chain? Just kind of give me a framework of that.
So in supply chain here, we have 2 hospitals. One, we run 24/7. The other one is 5 days a week at kind of a day shift hours, if you will. We also have the courier department. So the number that I would give you is about 78 employees, and probably close to 20 of those are couriers. So there's probably 50 people in supply chain. We have approximately 18 on the sourcing side. So that's everything from value analysis. We have 3 tech analysts, if you will, systems analysts. We have 4 value analysis people, 6 buyers, and then a value analysis manager, a procurement manager, and then our director of sourcing analytics. So a little bit of a spread there. Everybody else is boots on the ground operations in one of the 2 hospitals.
Are most of them on site, though, in one of those locations, or are they all remote, or many of them?
So in the corporate office here where I reside, Hayes, we have been probably 5 or 6 people for the last 2.5 years here in the office out of 18. Everybody else is still home. And so, trying to figure out how do I bring them back? I could do 2 hours with you on what I feel like you lose in this remote environment versus being elbow to elbow, idea sharing, esprit de corps, all of those things that, you lose your grip on that. And that's one of the things that my team has repeatedly said is that working remote, we've lost that team/family feel that we built before because we were in it to win it together before. And now it's like, sorry, I'm off and my team's just shut off, so I can't talk to you anymore. So.
Gotcha. That's really helpful to know.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Gary, you awake?
Hayes, you know what, Hayes? I wasn't going to bring this up, but now I am. So if Hayes really wasn't such a C-suite guy that kind of floating way up here and really understood courier services, non-acute, 70 different locations you have to get to, oh my gosh, Hayes. Big deal. Big deal. Talk about customer service every day, showing up, non-acute, delivering from Alan's corporate office, back and forth, warehouse. Hayes, we got to get you out remote. Come on out to Idaho. I'll take care of you. Come out to Allen. We'll show you. We'll take care of you. I love
Idaho
you,
is
you know
rather
I love you,
remote.
Hayes. I love you.
You know that, right?
I think we're all going to Allen.
Come on down.
He'll put us to work, though.
Yeah.
No.
Well, so Alan, you said something just now about how, all the things you could spend 2 hours talking about relative to what's lost in being remote. But the second half of this conversation is really about mentorship and coaching, so that not only that customer service bar gets raised and meets kind of your objectives for 2024, but that follow-up component also needs to be taught, not just the soft skills of customer service, but the hard skill of making sure that we're closing the loop on all of these open-ended items that sometimes don't resolve themselves, as quickly as we'd like in this immediate gratification world that we live in. Is it harder for you? And would you say it just is innately more difficult to mentor and coach people when you're not face to face with them on a regular basis?
I think it is. I think, to me, the art of follow up is, one, how you do it, how efficient are you at following up? And I like to say relentless without being a micromanager, but I have a pretty good system for following up. And, I get a lot of forehead smacks with, oh man, I forgot about that. And I'm like, okay, we have to have a way for you to remember that that's in your area or your department, your function. And so it is hard to coach that. And I think, again, not to blame the pandemic, but there was so much going on for like 3 years nonstop that, people dropped a ball here and there, and they might have dropped more than one. And so, it's like, how do you keep things going without being always on, is the term our CEO uses. You can't be always on. At some point, you hit the wall and you burn out. We were always on for a large part of the pandemic to make sure that we were bringing things in. But when someone is remote, you can't walk out into our office here. We're a cube farm, if you will. And you could walk out and you could talk to the buyers. You could walk out and talk to the analysts. You could talk to the systems people. You could brainstorm on the fly. Hey, I'm thinking this. And, they're either telling you, hey, you're crazy, or no, we've already done that, or here's what it would take to get there. And so now it's like, hey, are you busy? I can't see what you're doing. You got your little red presenting button on Teams. Don't bug me. So I think it is much harder to do. And the other thing that's lost in that, Justin, is that you can't get a real feel for somebody. We've got people who are brand new who have never worked in the office other than their first 90 days. We bring them in and we say, you got to work in the office for 90 days. We got to make sure that we set you up for success. And lots of times, day 60, they're like, hey, we think they're okay, let them go. And then they go home and you don't see them again. And we're trying to say, hey, we want to have this function, unless we have a mandatory meeting where everybody has to come in. It's like, hey, you guys want to come in for Thanksgiving dinner? No. It's like, don't want to do the potluck this year. It's like, oh, okay. And so I think that it's probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done as a leader is try to keep things manageable. You keep your leaders informed and know what those people are doing all the time when they're home. So it's tough.
Alan, do you actually have a curriculum, if you will, a document, a standard that you put in front of new hires and or your current employees about how to follow up and how to, be relevant to the...
We do, Hayes. We actually start in the interview process, and we ask in the interview process, this job is one that's complex and requires you to manage multiple projects at the same time. Tell us how you manage chaos. And those answers come back from, well, I use sticky notes, and I'm like, well, great. I hope you don't have a fan on your desk, right? And so I think things like that, where you're like, so how do you prioritize? How do you know which thing to do first? Oh, well, if Alan told me to do it, then I have to do it because he's the VP. No, that's not the answer we're looking for. So we're trying to identify those critical thinking skills during the interview to find out what's going on. And I think it starts there. And then when we onboard, we have an onboarding checklist for various positions that has everything from org charts to follow-up expectations, those things. If you were talking to my contract administrators right now who are legal, T's and C's, that's their role in the organization, they would tell you exactly what the expectations are for follow-up. It's 7 days for this, it's 2 weeks and escalate for that. So I think it's identifying those things up front, Hayes, and then being able to reinforce them along the way. And as I tell my management team, when I'm coaching them or mentoring them, is like, hey, look, you don't want to be the iron fist or the thumb on your people, but you have to let them know that you're looking at what they do. And so lots of times when you guys mention KPIs and metrics, I'll look at something that looks off, and then the next thing I know, we're having a conversation in the office next to mine about, hey, tell me about your open POs. Why haven't we followed up on those? And then they're like, well, I was looking at this. I'm like, well, I want you to think about what the VP of finance says or what the CFO says when he sees you got all these open POs. Does that mean we aren't paying, or do we have a cash flow problem? So there's a bigger picture for them to understand. So I think that we do a good job starting from the interview and carry it on through. And then I have at least once a month, I meet with my direct reports, the managers and directors. We meet weekly, but we are actually going over those things and we're covering those to where I'm like, tell me about your metrics. What metric are you reporting to me this week? What have you learned? And it has to be a teaching exercise to me. It's like, if you come to work and you're not here to teach and learn, stay home. Right. I mean, you've probably outlived your usefulness in the role that you're in. And so that's what I do. I joked earlier and said I come to work for entertainment. I do, but I also come to work to make sure that I can make people better than they were when they came to work for me. And I think that's one of the things that makes me go is people that have worked for me in the past said, hey, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if you hadn't invested in me, if you hadn't taught me those things, the importance of customer service and follow up and, the devil's in the details and those kind of things. So.
That's good. One thing that Alan, I had a friend of mine he was a client and he was always so good. If I send him an email and he has, let's say I'm asking him a question, he didn't know the answer. He has to go find out. I don't care. He would not just sit on the email. He'd always hit reply and say, I'm on it. I'll be back in touch and let me know. I'm not good at that. And that has been the last probably 6 months. It literally is my number one goal. If someone sends me an email, I'm on it. I'll get back in touch because so many things, you cannot just answer right away.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That first piece of acknowledging that you received the request is so incredibly valuable. And that's not really, you can say it's not follow-up, but it is. It's the first stage in follow-up is confirming accountability.
Right. Yeah. I think you're spot on. We get inundated with supplier emails and candidly, I try to answer them and I get it. Sometimes it's the, hey, look, get 3 no's before you leave the guy alone. And I'm just like, hey, look, we're either we don't have capacity. We don't have resources to consider anything out of the budget. I love technology, but I can't look at it right now because of competing priorities. So I try to extend that courtesy to our suppliers as well. And so I look at them as a customer of sorts. And so I've got to be the supplier advocate inside, but I also have to protect Mary Washington's interests at the same time. So, but I do agree that, just that simple act of saying, hey, I got it. And I think that's, I got an email today from someone who said, thank you for the diplomatic nudge. And so it was,
nudge.
As I tell people, it's like, how do you send that email? It says, I'm about to get out the club, but I need you guys to get your hands on this and get it fixed. And I think that sometimes people just don't do that. It's like, if you have a deadline and you're in a leadership position, it's you're responsible and you're accountable. And so I think those are words that, oftentimes get overlooked. It's like, you're responsible for something, but I'm accountable for supply chain overall. And so I have to make sure that we're doing what we need to do.
Yeah, that's great. Accountability. I mean, maybe Gary could learn something there.
I just hope Hayes, I just hope you'd put on your red receipt back on my text because it hurts when I don't see that and you took it off. It just kind of hurts. Like you just leave me hanging there. I don't know what's going on.
I want to talk about that diplomatic nudge.
I like that word. That's a stolen word. I'm taking
Which was, by the way, that just now is not an example of a diplomatic nudge.
Yes, correct.
Before we transition into that, so Alan, I think that's another key piece. Like everybody knows follow up, right? Like, hey, check in. I'm still working on this. People don't always do it. They don't always acknowledge that they got the request. I'm always really good if I know it's not me. I will shoot it. And this is important. I think you got to shoot it off to the person that it is responsible for it quickly. Like nobody wants to see you got to it 7 days later and it wasn't even yours. and you made the connection to the person whose job it was or who would be able to take care of them. Nobody wants to see that because it's a very clear marker that there was a 7-week delay because they simply just didn't know who to reach out to. So, I'm always big on that. If I know it's not me, shuttle it along. And maybe you want to make sure that the other person confirms accountability. So I'm usually pretty good about that when I pass it along. I actually pay attention to make sure that the receiver has accepted that responsibility. So I know there's no ball drop. But that diplomatic nudge is really important because sometimes I think when people do everything that they're supposed to do on their end, that they then don't follow up because it's in the other person's court. And, I just think great follow-up and great follow-up cultures are one of mutual accountability when there's a handoff. And so just because you handed off didn't mean that you're out of the equation anymore. And so I like that diplomatic nudge, which is, hey, I'm still, I have ownership of this process and I handed this off to you and I haven't heard back for a week. Just wanted to check in. Like, do you have what you need? Do you have questions? Like, that's a really important part of any relationship. I mean, follow up can be customer service or it can be operational and just simply how you work within the organization. But do you want to add to that at all? Like, because I feel like these are the nuances that are lost often in what people kind of look at follow up meaning, on the facade.
I think, Justin, you outlined it, to me, the way it is that you have to be able to do that. And, sometimes ask the tough questions, even when who actually, held things up or who the deliverable was to. So, we try to be very much tuned into the details, right? So here's the action item. Here's when it was assigned. Here's the what, and here's the when they said they could get back to it. So we always ask, how long do you think, what's a reasonable time for you to get to? And if they say, hey, I can get back to you next week, I'm like, okay. And sometimes if somebody says, I can get back to you tomorrow, I'm like, are you sure you don't need a couple of days? So I'm trying to give you a little hedge here and let you, have a little bit of breathing room so you don't overcommit and underachieve. And I think lots of times that's what people do. And then again, just to tie it all back together, it's like, I get it. Our clinical folks, they got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure. They're short staffed. But I can't make those decisions for them. And so we're working on an initiative right now where I'm like, it's now almost the middle of December. I have contract time. I have PO time. I have delivery time. And I have clinical education to get done before the 31st of December. You have to make a decision. Otherwise, you're going to go at risk with the process that you have in place right now in the operating room. And they're like, oh, okay. And so I'm like, so sometimes I feel like you have to wear multiple hats. You have to be you have to be the circus ringmaster sometimes. Sometimes you got to crack the whip. Sometimes you got to give the gentle nudge. Sometimes depending on the person and my relationship with them, I can joke them into a reaction, right? It's like, hey, should I get back with you next year before you give me an answer? And they know then that's my nudge to them. Other people, I just have to be direct because they have so much on their plate that they're like, I completely forgot about that. And Gary, I would tell you that I call that the R&D method, rip off and duplicate. So if you hear something and you want to use it, it's R&D and just give credit where credit is due, my friend.
Diplomatic nudge. Love it.
Alan, I heard someone that recently, if I could remember his name, I'd give him credit for it, but he was an exec on an IT company. And one of his kind of the tenets of one of their process is if you delegate it to a director or somebody below you, hey, I have a job. I need you to do that. The job is not completed until you go full circle and say, I've done it. He says, just because I tell you to do it and you might do it, it's not completed by our standards until you notify me that you completed it. And I'll just be curious, what do you think about that? I thought it was a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I like that. And so, as I said, I've got a reputation here among the leadership team and supply chain of being relentless at follow-up. And that's just through years of, I've got the notebook method. I've moved to my tablet and my phone. I've tried using Microsoft to do. And so it's like, no matter how you do it, you have to follow up on it. And so if I write it in a notebook and it gets lost with 17 other checkboxes, it's no good. And so, I'm constantly trying to perfect that skill haze myself. But I always tell people, I can't read your mind. So if I ask you to do something, I need you to come back and tell me, hey, that's taken care of, because I'll remember some point, and then I'm going to come and ask you, and you'll go, well, don't you trust me? I'm like, well, yeah, I trust you, but you never told me if you were done or not. So I'm trying to put closure on the ask, if you will. So I kind of like that.
Yeah. Well, that was what
I use Outlook, and I use the follow-up. So every time I make a phone call, I send an email to document what we talked about, and then I flag it. And every Sunday night, I sit down with all my follow-ups and I map out my week. And like, these are the things that this is how I maintain momentum in all of the projects and initiatives that I have going. And then obviously all kinds of things come up in the interim. And, so I'm constantly kind of managing that. And I might push something back saying, if this is for me to do, I'm not going to be able to get to this for another day or two, and I'll manage it a little bit. But I mean, really, there's all kinds of tools. You mentioned Notebook. You mentioned OneNote. Like, what's your go-to? What's the one that has worked the best for you? What method?
The one that works best for me, candidly, is Old School, and it's an old school notebook. And if I write a checkbook down, I mean, I have it, it's like, and if it has a flag in it, it's because I have something to do on that page. Otherwise, it just becomes pages in a book. And so I've got years and years worth of books. And like I said, I've got a Rocket book laying here on my desk. I've tried to use that, scan the pictures, and, I think between my old school composition book, Justin, and then candidly, I like Outlook and to-dos. I like being able to have the portability. If I leave my notebook here on my desk and I get home, like, damn it, my lifeline is gone,
Yeah.
and then, but if I get home and I go, oh, well, let me look in my to-dos, and I'm like, oh, great, I'm glad I looked, because I got a board report that's due tomorrow, or I got a board report that's due 2 days from now, those kind of things. So I think it just helps you keep all those things. And we share those skills here. We talk about soft skills, hard skills. We're trying to figure out how we can make our young leaders winners. It's like, we want them to follow up. We want them to be accountable. They're responsible for big ticket things in their areas. And we're teaching these things to them as well.
That's
so
very important. I love it.
Awesome interview, Alan. We're going to have you come back on.
Yeah,
you're a smooth guest.
Yeah,
I got to tell you that. And
I mean,
yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah, you did a great job.
I enjoy it.
I love this. This is really a kind of, to me, this is interesting to me. And I thought you did a really good job explaining it. And I love that you just kind of make it your culture. It's important to you. And it came through.
Well, good. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Alan, do you have anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No. I like I said, I appreciate the opportunity just to be able to kind of talk shop, if you will. And like I said, Justin and I connected at ARM, and it was a good experience. And so for me to be able to do this again and share something that may help some younger supply chain person out there who's drowning, in all the stuff that we do day to day. And like I said, if I can lighten it up a little bit and let them know that, there's light at the end of the tunnel, but there'll be dark days that go on and, several in a row. So hang in there, But I appreciate the opportunity as well.
Well done. Absolutely. Well
Great
done.
job. Great job.
All right, that was Alan Edwards, Vice President of Supply Chain at Mary Washington Healthcare. And Hayes, it's funny, sometimes we stop the interview, we wrap it up, and then we wind up having a great conversation afterwards. And this was one of those cases, because we started talking about, follow-up tools and how to ensure that you're closing that loop. And, you brought up using a CRM, and we were thinking and kind of brainstorming with Alan about most ERPs really do not have any kind of CRM functionality, and what a benefit that would be for just providing, some flags for follow-up, because, a lot of people are using notebooks or trying to leverage email, and with the scale that supply chain has to follow up on contracts and open POs, what a benefit that would be.
It would be a huge benefit, because it's come up before in other conversations we've had on here. It is a problem. And I'm curious, hey, if you're out there and you have a CRM for supply chain, let us know. I want to know about it.
Yeah.
But clearly Alan's done a good job with the culture of follow up and making sure everybody's accountable. He did a great job. So I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks so much, Alan. Thanks so much for being here today.
All right. Well, Gary was back with us. So on behalf of Hayes, Gary, and myself, thanks for listening to this episode of Power Supply.
Bam!
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Power Supply. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on your iPhone or Android. Simply search for Power Supply in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@powersupplymedia.net. We look forward to hearing from you.